cockpit of the Stellar Nomad screamed with the sound of warping alloy. Lyra Soul's claws dug into Kalin's arm, her bioluminescent scales flickering a frantic, dying violet. Outside, the atmospheric storm turned the sky into a furnace of red dust. Behind them, the first mercenary pulse fire bloomed against the shields like a dying star. You're standing on the edge of a secret that could rewrite the stars, but the void is closing in fast. If you want to see whether they break atmosphere or burn up in the descent, subscribe to the Chronicle before the signal fades. The copper tang of recycled oxygen had been the only thing on Kalin's mind 3 hours before the first shot was fired. He had been adjusting a loose coolant valve on his environmental suit, cursing the gritty dust of Cinder 9 that seemed to permeate even the reinforced seals of his ship. It started as a jagged line on a flatline sensor. Kalin sat in the pilot's chair, watching the irregular energy spikes pulse from the forbidden valleys of the obsidian spires. This planet was a graveyard of tectonic plates and jagged glass, officially logged as uninhabited for 3 centuries. Yet the readout from Vera, the ship's AI, confirmed the pulses were artificial, rhythmic, malfunctioning, and undeniably sentient. The signal wasn't a distress call. It was a heartbeat in the vacuum of a dead world. Kalin didn't believe in ghosts, but he did believe in salvage rights. He brought the Nomad down in a plume of orange thruster wash, landing on a shelf of volcanic rock that groaned under the ship's weight. Following the pings on his handheld scanner, he trekked into the shadow of the spires. The air was a haze of particulate stone. Suddenly, the scanner went haywire, the needle spinning as if he'd walked into a magnetar. He reached out a gloved hand, expecting cold stone, but his fingers passed through a shimmering translucent veil, a camouflage field. Behind the curtain sat a research camp that looked like it had been hit by a localized supernova. In the center of the wreckage, a figure lunged. She moved with the grace of a predator and the precision of a clockmaker. A jagged piece of hull plating leveled at Kalin's throat before he could draw his breather. Her skin was a map of shimmering ridges. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of feline ferocity and academic terror. Blood, a deep shimmering cobalt, stained her shoulder where a piece of shrapnel remained embedded. Kalin didn't reach for his sidearm. Instead, he reached into his external pack and pulled out a battered stainless steel canteen. He set it on a flat crate and stepped back, palms open. "You're dehydrated," he said, his voice muffled by his helmet. "And that shoulder is going to go septic if we don't seal it." The alien woman, whom he would later learn was a physicist named Lyra Soul, stared at the canteen. Her chest heaved. Slowly, the improvised weapon lowered. She grabbed the steel canteen, the metal clinking against her talons, and drank with a desperation that bypassed caution. It was the first bridge between them, a simple vessel of water offered in a wasteland. The tension in this canyon was thick enough to choke a thruster, and it was only getting heavier. If you're ready to see how a simple act of mercy turns into a galactic hunt, subscribe now. The storm was just beginning to find its voice. As she drank, Lyra Soul began to speak in a fragmented dialect of the trade tongue. She wasn't a scavenger. She was the survivor of a sabotage-induced explosion. Her team had been working on something called a phase-shifting anchor, technology meant to fold space, now being hunted by the very men who funded it. Kalin helped her to her feet. He could see the way her gaze constantly darted toward a heavy reinforced data module sitting in the dirt. It was the echo of her life's work, the only thing she had left. "We need to move," she rasped, clutching the steel canteen like a talisman. "Valerius. He does not leave witnesses." They spent the next hour hauling the sensitive equipment back toward the Nomad. Kalin watched her move, stiff from the wound, but with a rhythmic calculation, as if she were solving an equation with every step. They were halfway up the ramp when the ship's external comms surged to life. A face appeared on the secondary monitor, cold and sharp as a surgical blade. Director Valerius didn't offer greetings. "Captain Voss," the director said, his voice echoing in the cargo bay. "You are currently in possession of stolen corporate property. Return the physicist and the data, or we will strip your ship for parts while you are still inside it." Kalin looked at Lyra Soul. She was leaning against a stack of crates, her hand pressed against the blue stain on her shoulder, her eyes fixed on him. "Space doesn't care about your research, but the men who want to weaponize it certainly do." He didn't answer Valerius. He slammed the hatch shut and punched the ignition. The Stellar Nomad didn't just lift, it clawed its way out of the gravity well. Kalin's hands were a blur across the haptic interface, pushing the sublight engines into a dangerous red line. Beside him, Lyra was hunched over her salvaged phase-shifting anchor, her claws clicking against the casing as she bypassed the corporate lockout codes. "They are closing," she whispered, her voice a low vibration that resonated in the deck plates. 3 signatures. Rapid acceleration. Kalin didn't need the radar. He could feel the proximity of the mercenary interceptors in the way his teeth ached from the incoming targeting pings. He banked the ship hard, diving back toward the churning maw of the obsidian spires, where the atmospheric storm was thickest. If we stay in the open, they'll pick us apart, Kalin gritted out, eyes locked on the roaring wall of red dust ahead. We're going into the soup. If you're wondering whether a freighter can outrun a military-grade pursuit in a hurricane of glass, subscribe to the log before we hit the wall. The transition was violent. One moment they were in the thin, cold black of the upper atmosphere. The next, the world was a screaming kaleidoscope of crimson sand and lightning. Static electricity danced across Lyra's scales, turning them into a shimmering tapestry of violet sparks. Kalin used the storm's interference to mask their signature, weaving between jagged stone pillars of the spires. Behind them, the mercenary lead ship overshot, its sensors blinded by the ionized dust. The anchor is stable, Lyra announced, her breathing shallow but rhythmic. She looked at Kalin with a strange alien intensity. But I cannot just hide it. If Valerius keeps the primary facility, he will simply build another. We have to go back to the source. She wasn't just talking about survival, she was talking about a total reset. Kalin understood the weight of it. They didn't just find a new planet, they found a reason to stop running. While Kalin drew the remaining fleet into a lethal game of hide-and-seek among the canyons, Lyra Soul used the ship's short-range transmitter to slave the anchor to the facility's main core. It was a surgical strike conducted at Mach 3. She bypassed the security firewalls with the ease of someone who had built the locks herself, pulling her colleagues' vitals onto the screen. She's alive, Lyra Soul breathed, and the data is primed. The final approach was a blur of G-forces and alarms. Kalin skimmed the roof of the corporate facility, the Nomad's belly grazing the comm towers. Lyra didn't hesitate. She triggered the quantum cascade, a silent wave of localized entropy that began to vaporize every byte of weaponized research in the facility servers. The sky was a furnace of red dust. The cockpit rattled under the mercenary pulse fire. A heavy hit sheared off a stabilizer fin. Lyra's claws dug into Kalin's arm as the ship groaned, the metal screaming under the pressure of the storm and weapons fire. For a heartbeat, the world was nothing but vibration and the smell of ozone. Then the facility below erupted, not in fire, but in a clean white light that swallowed the darkness of Valerius's ambition. They broke the atmosphere just as the Science Council received the burst transmission of the evidence. Behind them, Cinder 9 shrank into a marble of angry orange. The mercenary fleet left scattered in the wake of the storm. Months later, the air was different, thick, sweet, and smelled of crushed mint. Kalin sat on the edge of the Nomad's lowered ramp, watching the triple suns of Ethelgard set behind a forest of glowing ferns. He held the old stainless steel canteen in his hand. It was scratched, the metal dulled by the sands of Cinder 9, but it was clean. Lyra walked down the ramp to join him. She took the canteen from his hand and dipped it into a pool of bioluminescent water nearby, the liquid glowing a soft neon blue as it filled the vessel. She didn't look like a refugee anymore. She looked like an explorer. She handed the canteen back to him, her fingers lingering against his for a second longer than necessary. The predatory grace was still there, but the fear was gone. They were no longer running from a past. They were looking at a horizon that finally belonged to them. The bioluminescent water pulsed inside the steel, a tiny trapped star reflecting the new world they had earned together. The canteen had started as a tool for survival, but now it was a vessel for discovery. What would you risk your life to protect if you found it in the dark? Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.